Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, Flower Alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. I'm here with John Tabis. John, for the listeners who don't know you, if you want to fill us in with a snapshot.
Sure. John Tabis, founder and chairman of the board of the Bouqs company. We started this company in 2012, a buddy of mine and I, to change the way that we all give and receive love via flowers. It's a pretty broken industry with a lot of waste, both economically and environmentally. And we thought there would be a better way to honor those big, important moments like birthdays and anniversaries and I'm sorry's and I love yous and I miss you because of COVID. And so we've built it from a company of a few of us working part-time to now about 90 people here dispersed around Los Angeles, no longer in Marina del Rey. Well, dispersed across the West Coast. Some folks have gone home. That's been sort of the last, call it 7 or 8 years. Before that, I was largely a consultant inside of larger organizations, helping them build brands like Walt Disney Company, Bain & Company, and generally sort of live in this world of where companies meet humans and how do those two interact.
And how did you decide on flowers?
So I was at Disney, and the first catalyst was I started feeling like I was going to work every day and it didn't matter. For a while, I loved my job, and I still love the company. I have a lot of great friends that still work there, but after 6 years or so, I started feeling like I was just a cog in the machine, and I wasn't feeling like even if I did the best job possible, would it really move things that much? And so was my effort and my time resulting what I'd like it to result in? And after some self-reflection, the answer was no. So then the question was like, what do I go do next? I knew I wanted to make decisions to help change things. No one at Disney was going to let me do that, rightfully so. And so I started looking into the startup world because a couple of my friends had successfully built companies, and I talked to them about their journeys and how transformative it was for them, how much they learned, how hard it was, what was great about it, what was terrible about it. And I thought, that sounds interesting, but I wasn't ready at that point to sort of jump into something. So I went to work at another startup called Shoedazzle, which is a shoe subscription company. If you haven't heard of it, or maybe based on your face, your smile, it looks like maybe you have. And while I'm not a fashion guy at all, as you can tell, I just wear like my Bouqs gear all the time. I really loved what I found there, which was this group of people trying to build something from nothing. And I fell in love with it almost immediately, just the energy and the excitement and we don't know what's going to happen next. And so decided I wanted to start something, but had no idea what it was I wanted to start. I had obviously worked in e-commerce, I'd worked in media, and was batting around some ideas. And my co-founder and I started talking about his business. He was in Ecuador. He's a buddy of mine from college, running a farm. And he was looking for ways to make his business better. And farmers have a tough go. In Floral, you're the beginning of the value chain. You create the product, but you're sort of the most ignored, the least important in the industry. And so it's a hard business. And my co-founder's farm that he ran, they invested very heavily in sustainability. They invested a lot in their people. Most farmhands are women. About 75-80% of farmhands are women. For a lot of them, it's the only job they'll ever have. The average tenure at a farm is about 2.5 to 3 years. But at that farm, the tenure was 20 years.
Whoa.
Because they treated people so well. Free on-site childcare, free on-site healthcare, English as a second language training. People would get that job, keep it forever, and send their kids to college because of that job.
So awesome.
But no one knew, right? They grew these flowers in a better way, sustainably, responsibly, great for the people that grew them. And they entered a supply chain that mixed them up with every other flower. And so no one on the other end would ever know how those flowers were farmed. And my co-founder found that frustrating because they spent money and time and passion on that. And there are other farms that have conservatories on their land where they save injured animals. There are other farms that, every farm that we work with recycles 100% of their water. They don't cut down the rainforest. These are important things that people didn't know about. And so we started talking about both the economic challenges, but then these sort of greater good challenges. And he was frustrated that he just couldn't tell the world, hey, these are my flowers and they make the world better in this way.
Right.
And on the other side of the equation, way down the other side, is the consumer. And I found the brands to be not relevant for me as a shopper, not something that I wanted to send to my loved ones. They were all kind of the same. The websites, the designs, the pictures, it all looked the same. And I thought, well, gosh, if the farmer's unhappy and I'm unhappy, why don't we just put the two of those together and see if we can build a better mousetrap here to make floral better? And so that's what we decided to do. We kind of whipped together a couple $1,000 and off we went and built the Bouqs company.
Wow. Incredible. And now you have almost 90 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been an 8-year run so far, right?
Yeah, it'll be 8 years in November. So we started talking about it about 8 years ago, March. And then that summer, so 8 years ago, sort of now, we started building it, but everyone was doing it kind of part-time. Like I kept my job at Shoedazzle. He kept his job at the farm. We got some friends to kind of pitch in and work a couple nights and weekends. We'd go to Izzy's Deli up on Wilshire, and we'd get like a late night matzo balls and just sit around and do the work. But it officially launched 8 years ago, this coming November 6th.
What have been some of your biggest challenges, just like in business?
Yeah, so I think business in building this business, there's a couple parts that have been really hard for me, and I'm sure for every founder, for every business person, it's different. But I think one part that's been really hard is pushing off what you know needs to be done for the future for things that have to be done today. And this is really hard, I think, especially for employees that come into companies, because they come in an early stage company and they're kind of like, well, to do this job, great, I need these 5 things that I don't have. Can I have them? And the answer is like, yes, you can have them in 3.5 years. And that stinks, right? That's a really hard thing to do, to sort of deal with the restriction on just what you can give. And the reality is, in the first year when we launched the business, we had $13,000. So one of our very earliest team members came to me and was like, I need $2,000 to keep working on this project. And I was like, I can't give it to you. That's like almost 20% of all of our money. I need to spend it on servers and advertising, and I can't. And that person left. And that person walked away from north of $1 million worth of equity at this point. And that's really hard to do. And it's really hard to talk about now. I had the conversation with this person at a bar. I said, hey, you will look back on this, and I'm asking you for 3 months, not forever, just 3 months until we can get some financing in. It's like, nope, can't. So it's really hard to make everyone happy in an organization and to do all the things you need to do to make the customers, and in our case, the farmers, happy when you're just restricted on resources. That is just, it's a struggle as a founder, because everyone looks to you like, hey, why don't you fix this problem? And the answer is like, well, to get more money, we have to accomplish these things, which means we have to accomplish these things without those resources. And the answer is just, we just have to figure it out. And the people for whom that is uncomfortable or they dislike that, they end up leaving, sometimes happily, sometimes unhappily. And so I think that leads to the second part, which is I'm someone who wants everyone to be happy all the time. Like, I'm absolutely a people pleaser. I want everyone to like me. I want everyone to like my company. I want everyone to just be happy. And the reality is humans aren't always happy with each other. And because I was in charge, I was often the source of their unhappiness. And I was very uncomfortable with that. And generally speaking, never really got super comfortable with the idea that like it was up to me to make sure that they stayed employed. It was up to me to make sure that they were working on the right things. Like, managing a team was, I did it. I did it for 8 years. And I guess I did it pretty well, because we're here. We're a company of 90 people. We've raised $75 million in capital. Like, we're a big brand and we're going to be huge over time. But I really didn't like it. It was very difficult for me to put the company over the person if I had to. And it was very difficult for me to put the person over the company. It felt like this constant pull in both directions. And then the probably biggest source of challenge for me was then the third leg, which was my family. We started the company when my son was 8 months old. I quit my job, so I was making $0. So my wife was working as an assistant principal, which is like 100-hour-a-week job. So it was me and my baby boy and our little puppy and this company. And I got a better balance in the last 2 years, but for a long time, the primary emotion I felt was guilt. Either I wasn't doing enough for the company, I wasn't doing enough for myself, or I wasn't doing enough for my family. And generally speaking, the myself part for 6.5 years did not count at all. I completely discounted myself as a part that mattered in this equation. But then always I felt like I was either letting down my family or the company, because both absolutely needed me kind of all the time. Because this early stage company is a baby. It lives and breathes because its parent feeds it. and it needed me 24/7, but so did my 9-month-old son. And so that was in some ways a magical time, because I got to spend a lot of time with him that it would have been at a daycare and I wouldn't have been with him. So that was, and I did my earliest pitches walking him around in a stroller with earbuds in, talking to different venture capitalists and stuff. But it was also a guilt-ridden time where I just didn't. So that part was really hard.
What's your son's name?
His name is John, but he goes by EO, like
EO.
Captain EO, the 1984 3D epic starring Michael Jackson, R.I.P. We nicknamed him when he was a fetus. We didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but we didn't like calling him it. We couldn't call him he or she, or so we were saying it, and we were like, oh, that's so terrible. We just need a nickname. And we were like, what's a nickname that means nothing? It doesn't mean boy, it doesn't mean girl. And I worked at Disney, and we had just gone to Disneyland, and there was a Captain EO show was on. I was like, how about EO? That means nothing. And then we were supposed to get rid of that name, but now he's 8 and he's still EO.
It's so funny because I hear sometimes like people from the Far East will say that children bring money, that children bring wealth. And I hear, stories of entrepreneurs who have children at the same time they're growing their business, which I think is amazing. Kudos to you. I know that whole piece of like the first 5 years, work 7 days a week, as many hours as you can. And I don't know how, having a child in the mix too. Incredible. Like,
and then want to hear a worse part. So my wife gets pregnant a second time.
Yeah.
And we find out, I don't know, 6 weeks later that it's twins.
No way.
So now we're going to have twins. And and we had started a home renovation.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
That's stressful enough.
It's so much worse. So my wife is it was supposed to just be a master bathroom reno.
Oh boy.
And about 2 weeks, they were probably like maybe a month away from being done. So we were going to have the twins while this was going on, but it was in one part of the house, and we're whatever. 2 weeks before she's due, the contractor bursts a pipe and floods our entire first floor.
Nice.
And my wife's, the poor woman, the twins were both born at like fully 8 pounds each. They were huge twins. And so she was just super pregnant, super uncomfortable, like ready to have the babies. And now all of a sudden it's like, can't have the babies. Our house is flooded. We don't have any.
Well, if the water broke in your house too.
Yeah. So we had to move out into a rental with 3 bedrooms. And there was us, there was my son, and then we had my mother-in-law coming to help because we were kind of stuck. And I had the company. And then the contractor who flooded our house essentially stopped working and refused to fix anything. So then I was coming here, doing manual labor in the morning from like 4 or 5 a.m. to like 8 or 9 a.m., going to the office, working, going back to the house, working on it, then coming home and trying to help my wife with the twins, who didn't really sleep. And I did that for like 8 to 9 weeks before the contractor really started to get going again, and things kind of stabilized. We were out of the house for like 7 or 8 months with twin babies, no air conditioning in the house. And it was the summer of 2015 where like it was like hot. It was like now. It was like super hot in LA. That was the hardest. I almost broke. Like I almost genuinely broke as a human being. Yeah. Because and the poor company, I remember at one point at the end of it, it was like 3 months in, 4 months in or something like that. We had sort of gotten out of this panic mode, and we had like an all hands, and I talked to the company and I was like, okay, so this is what's been going on. And they were like, you didn't tell anyone. We just thought we were doing a terrible job because you were angry all the time. And I was like, no, I just slept for 2.5 hours a night for like 3 months straight. And these contractors and this, but it's one of the things that I learned about leadership is like, they thought it was about them. They were doing great. I was so proud of them because they kind of kept the company going without me. I was mentally and emotionally always over here with a renovation and babies. But they thought it was about them. And I got a great lesson from one of my mentors on our board. And she was like, look, if you have a upset stomach and you go like this during someone's presentation, they think you hate it. Hide the stomach ache. You have to fake it so that they don't, because they're going to interpret that as about you and them. And even it has nothing to do with them. You just ate a bad burrito the night before or whatever. But that was the bottom of the journey for sure. That was a really tough summer. But in the same time, like worked out pretty good. We have two healthy twin boy girl, Avery and Owen. They're amazing. They're starting kindergarten at home downstairs right now, which is not the experience we were hoping for, but we take it as we get it. And the team really pulled together over that summer and did a great job. And that was, to me, sort of a foundational part in the journey, was that 2015 summer, like seeing all those people throw in together, make it work, you know, despite having kind of an absentee boss in a company that was only probably 20 people at the time.
Did that force you at that time were there certain things that you just like had to let go of in the business and kind of like have everybody rally together in your absence in that way?
Yeah. I mean, the how much you keep and how much you give away is really hard in this journey for two reasons. One is, at the beginning, you're 100% of it as a founder. There's not, you know, my co-founder was in Ecuador, so I was 100% of the US. He was 100% of the Ecuador.
Right.
And so every single part you're giving up at some point, right? Every single part. And what's really hard is this sense of the company is you and you are the company. These two things are not separate, and it's almost impossible as a founder to come to the realization that it's just a job. It's really hard. And then the success of that entity means the success of you or the failure of you. And so when you give something up to someone else, you say, hey, now I need you to go do this. You're afraid that it's not going to get done the way you need it to get done. And you're afraid that it will not get done to the standards that you would do it. But you also learn very quickly that you just can't scale. Like, you just can't do it. The worst moment of scaling for me was in 2014. So we were about a year and a couple months old. Valentine's Day. We'd finally raised money. We'd hired an operations manager who started 10 days before Valentine's Day. We sold so many flowers we had never sold before that our number of contacts from customer service went from like 10 or 20 a week to like 1,000 in a day. But we didn't have, it was me and my mom. I brought my mom out of retirement at 70 to do all of our customer service. And then we had this brand new operations manager. I was like, oh, here's 1,000 customer service emails. She couldn't get through those herself. So she and I together did like 21 hours a day for 3 days in a row of just customer service response. It's just respond. And you do it because there's no other choice. We couldn't hire someone. We couldn't find a service. And it was live and in the moment that change happened so dramatically for the business. And that woman, her name was Mimi, God bless her. She stayed with us for like 3 years, and she was awesome and really helped us grow up. But if I were her, I would have run for the hills after week 2 because it was nuts.
And what was the change? Like, how did that, like, what happened to get you from 10 to 15 inquiries per week to 1,000 a day?
So, I mean, it happened gradually over time, but it's hard to predict, especially early on. If you think about it, we had 1 month Valentine's Day before that, and it was about 4 months after we launched. So we were teeny tiny. So I want to say we did a couple hundred boxes, and that was a big deal, but it was like a couple hundred boxes. Now we had been around for a full year, a full cycle, but we hadn't had another one of those big spikes, and we'd built the business, but we didn't know how much more it was going to go up. It turns out that brand reputation, our customer base, all that kind of stuff, we're big enough now where the spike was going to be a lot larger than we anticipated. And so we just didn't know the business. Nowadays, we can predict it within 3 to 5%. The team knows what's coming. They can, between what we do on marketing, what we've seen the previous years, what we saw in the previous months, we can get to a good sense. But back then we had no idea what was coming our way.
And so do you have a production team? Like, are folks on your team building the bouquets and boxing them and shipping them?
So we have a network. So our model is we deploy technology at farms around the world. Ecuador and Colombia and the United States are our 3 primary countries, but we have flowers in Canada, Peru, Chile, Kenya, all around the world. And our technology essentially gives the farmer everything they need to participate in our network. So how many stems, so essentially the ingredient list, pictures of what it should look like by size, instructions on how to pack the boxes, the note cards, all that stuff all kind of comes together and makes it super easy for them to automate that process as much as possible. But it's farmhands at the farm that are actually assembling the bouquets and sending them out.
I was going to say, so if you want like roses from Ecuador, they're going to create that bouquet for you. But if you wouldn't be putting together something with flowers from Canada and Kenya and Ecuador, Colombia, because you'd stay to one region for your bouquet. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Most of the time you'll have multiple farms sort of that are within a radius delivering to a single farm for combinations to get more complex bouquets. Mm-hmm. The rose farms generally grow roses, and that's great if somebody wants a dozen roses, but our buyers especially like a lot of variety. They like a lot of things put in there. We will combine things from different farms for certain types of SKUs. We have a wedding offering, which is fully hand tied. Like it arrives and it's a perfect wedding bouquet. You can just take it out and it's ready to walk down the aisle.
Wow.
Those flowers can be sourced from all around the country. But generally speaking, a farm will work with what they grow and then maybe what like a neighboring farm or two will grow. It does change some of what we can do, but because of the large number of farms that we have and the changes in seasonality and new farms coming on, we are able to get a pretty nice variety of different options for folks.
Wow. So the 90 folks that you have working with you are like sales, marketing, customer service, HR, admin,
technology. And the support services for them. Exactly. We're essentially a technology and a marketing organization. We have a big supply chain team that works with, the planning piece, the execution piece, but we're not doing that. We don't have employees that are out doing the packing, the cutting, the shipping, et cetera.
And how did you get the farms in, say, Colombia to be adept at the fulfillment piece, the shipping all over worldwide?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was a tough sell. The good thing was my co-founder was running our first farm. So that was an easy sell. He said to himself, do you want to do this? And he said, yes. That was great. And then he had a good sort of friendly farm next door that he was able to get on board to. So we started with 2 farms. 80% of what we sold was roses because that was the farm that he was running. And then we had a couple other little things. But at the beginning, it was a tough sell for a lot of farms. We went to folks and said, hey, here's a new way of doing things. It's going to be profitable for you. It's a great way to do business. And they're all just kind of like, nah, how many orders are you going to give me a week? We were kind of like, I don't know, 5, 10. And it's 10 times 10 roses is not interesting.
But it's retail, right? And
it was better economics for them, certainly. And it was going to open up new things later. But again,
patience.
They weren't ready to make that change. Now, the first 2 farms that tried it worked pretty darn well. And then they all go to lunch together somewhere and they talk about, oh, what's this crazy Bouqs thing that you're doing? And they're like, well, actually, now it's 10% of our revenue. And they go, oh, wow. Can we get in on that? It's like, sure. So then it sort of sold itself. At the beginning, we were knocking on doors, trying. And then over time, it just became farms started reaching out, friends of friends. Hey, these people and I went to dinner. They talked about it. Can we try? The US, though, was actually the hardest nut to crack. So we got a really good presence in South America, but we wanted to deliver faster. And when I was on Shark Tank in 2014, this is what all the sharks killed me on, was that we were slow to deliver because we were delivering out of South America. It took 5 or 6 days to arrive.
Yeah.
And all the sharks were just like, oh, you're the worst. We hate you now. But we wanted to solve that by bringing on United States farms. Plus, we wanted to have some homegrown stuff. Right. And so, we're in LA, so farms weren't that far. So I'd drive up the coast and show up and knock on the door and give them my spiel. And they would be like, nope, sorry, not going to do it. And that kept happening, just kept getting rejected over.
Why? Why were they not interested?
They didn't know who we were. We were kind of random out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And similar to the South American farms at the beginning, they just didn't want to change the way that they did things.
Yeah.
And then a couple of them did something similar, but with a competitor, and they were unable to work with us. Mm. But then we raised our Series A, our first real financing of $5.5 million, and we got some press in it. And the head of the California Cut Flower Commission, which is like the industry group, tweets out, the link to our funding and essentially says, this company will never make it. They're clueless. They don't work with American farms. And I saw it because we were tagged in it, and I ran social media at the time. And so I just wrote it back. I was like, hey, we've been trying to get American farms on board. They keep saying no. And so he and I, through his sort of semi-insulting tweet, started a direct message chain. And within weeks, he was going to his farm saying, you have to work with these guys. And his name's Casey Cronquist, and became this massive partner for us. And now we have a huge network in California and across the states now, primarily because Casey decided like, hey, I'm going to make this work. He opened the doors for us. And so turned sort of a little bit of a cheeky tweet into something that actually ended up being super productive and helpful for us.
And how did somebody just reached out to me today and was like, hey, we want to invest money in your company. And I wrote back and said, no, we're not looking for investors. And he said, well, that's funny because most people tell me that. And then they, get an infusion of money. And he was like encouraging me to think about what would you do if you had more money. So my question for you is, how did you get to the point where you were like, yeah, I want to get investors. I want to bring, in larger capital so I can make more happen? Like what triggered that for you?
Yeah. So at the beginning, we very much thought we would bootstrap it and be independent the whole way. We did that. We sort of started with that intention. And then as the company grew, and it grew pretty quickly, the amount of work that had to be done to survive was high. Just to satisfy the customer with the product, deliver it, ship it, let alone to build for the future in ways that would make that easier, more profitable, more successful, whatever. And we got about 7 or 8 months in, and I was working well over 100 hours a week and making $0. And at one point, I just looked at my wife and I was like, I can't. I just physically and mentally and emotionally can't keep going. I need to hire people, but we just didn't have the finances for it. Like we had a marketing intern that we had hired full time. We had our initial developer who worked for sort of his internship was going to come on board full time. We could barely afford them. And that was with paying me nothing. And we needed like 5 or 6 more people because the business was growing to an extent. And so that was one piece, was just pure, can I do the job? Yes or no? And for me at that point, the answer was no. But what really solidified it for me was I started thinking of this no longer as a 2 to 5 year journey where we could get it kind of profitable and get 10 million in revenue and sell it, which is what I really initially thought of it as. So I thought it'd be too hard to make it really big. To saying like, hey, we have such great momentum and customer feedback is so good and it's so much better for the farmers that we had this bigger vision of let's build something that can change the way the whole thing works, started to take hold. And I found it really hard to pull back from the excitement around that. But if you're going to do that, you're going to need capital, right? You're not going to bootstrap that, at least not in our industry. In some industries you can. But to go and build that really big thing, I knew we were going to have to raise a good amount of money. And so when those two things came together, it was kind of like, all right, let's go raise some cash. We did try to keep it kind of smaller in the beginning so that we weren't losing control or getting to a place where we were kind of stuck without being sure that big vision was possible. But then after a couple of years and we were growing as fast as we were growing, getting bigger, we saw that was possible. And so we kind of fully committed to that path. It's a hard decision to make, though.
When you say you got so excited about changing the way the whole thing works, is it kind of like from taxis to Uber? Like, you're like changing the entire industry?
That's the vision. So flowers today are delivered to the US. 90% again are sold out of Ecuador and Colombia. They go from farmers to transportation to the local airport, sometimes through exporters, sometimes direct, to Miami, where they go through customs and the importers who then auction them off, who then sell them to wholesalers, who then sell them to local florists. And they get orders from websites.
Middlemen.
And all of those are fine businesses. There's nothing wrong with those businesses. What we thought was, if we can control all of that, we'll have better quality, better freshness. We'll have transparency of where it came from so we can tell the stories of these farmers and have a better customer experience too. If you look at the economics of that at massive scale, and we're not there yet, we're getting there, it becomes cheaper. And it is, by any metric you can think of, whether it's goodwill, economic, whatever, better. And so as soon as we achieve that, the whole market then has to flip to that. There becomes a flipping point where you say, it doesn't make any sense to source in any other way. So a Bouqs flower is the way we should source. And that could be whatever. That could be a wedding venue, or a bride herself, or an individual, or a corporate business, or whatever, a hotel lobby, whomever it is. We should have a value prop that makes it so obvious that it should be us, that it forces the whole economy within Floral to say, yeah, we should all source this way. We should all know where they come from. We should all hold our vendors accountable to sustainability and the way that they treat their people. And once we sort of latched onto that being possible, we were kind of like, there's no other, we can't not do it that way. We might fail, but we can't not try, because that is such a big impact on the world.
Wow. And is it less expensive? I mean,
so I can't talk in specifics about the economics, but at scale it is. I want to talk, like, at the beginning we were more expensive.
Yep.
At the end we will be less expensive. Right now we're somewhere in between. But
and farmers better taken care of at the same time.
Absolutely, they get paid faster, they get paid more. And the hope is that at some point people look at it as the way instead of a new way, right? There's a long journey. It's sort of like, I always try to liken it to Starbucks, right? Like 35 years ago, no one thought that people would go to coffee shops and pay $8 to kind of hang out. And that's now what coffee culture has become. And there's lots of other brands now that do similar or better or worse, depending on your taste, things, but they're the ones that created that change. And my hope is that at some point, every business is sourcing in a way that looks something like this, and that we're the catalyst for what created that change.
That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's the best part is that it's kind of working. There were times in the journey where we weren't sure if it was going to. We as a business have been close to failure multiple times along the way, but we're at a place now with the team. Our team is, I would put them up against anyone in the LA tech ecosystem. It's the most amazing group of people. They care so much about the mission. They care so much about our customers. They care so much about our farmers and about one another. And the technology works, and we have a great leadership team. So I think we have a really bright future ahead of us.
And is that what inspires you most about the business right now? Is that changing the industry?
I think at a macro level, yes. What I personally get jazzed about is sort of anything new. That's why I'm a good founder. I'm a junkie for new ideas and what else can happen and that kind of thing. And it's one of the main reasons we hired a new CEO who started in May, amazing individual named Alejandro Bethlen, because I found that I didn't get as much excitement out of what do the next 3 months look like, but I do get a ton of excitement around, hey, this one other new thing we could try. What could that look like for the business? And so that's where I'm personally jazzed. That could be internal efforts. Like we have an effort around diversity and inclusion right now that I've helped spearhead, and I'm working on that. And that's super fun because it's new and different. But after 6 months, 2 years, that will probably move to someone else's plate. And then, new features, new business models, new partnerships, whatever it might be, is kind of where I spend my time now. That's what gets me up in the morning every day. At the beginning of a company journey, everything is like that because everything's new. You've never done it before, right? But every single day you go, it's less and less a percentage new. And I think it's the founder's dilemma. Some folks, Mark Zuckerberg, can work on the same thing for literally their entire life and be satisfied. I've said this a couple of times. Like, I don't understand Olympic athletes. I don't understand how anyone can have that much focus and dedication on one thing every single day. Because I don't care what the thing is. It could be getting a pedicure, which I love. I love a great pedicure. But if you told me I was going to do that for 8 hours a day every single day, I'd be like, kind of over pedicures now. What else do we have on the menu? And so it's a really cool sort of moment in the company's time for me personally, and I think for the company overall.
Can you speak a little bit to a topic that's been coming up to my mind a lot lately is the way the world is right now with so many crazy things that don't make sense. So many people frustrated, kids supposed to be going to online schools, but having a rough time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Can you speak to the capacity for this drive to create things and create a world that you want to live in as I don't want to say coping skill, but it's where you can deposit if you get frustrated or angry about the way things are, how you can funnel that energy into creating the world as you want it to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think on a meta level, I think that this will happen at a mass level coming out of this. And I don't know what coming out of this means. It could be at the end of this year or next year or 10 years later when all the effects are, I don't know when it is, but I do feel like there will be a cultural reckoning, a cultural shift driven by sort of the confluence of coronavirus, mass lockdowns, inequality, all of these things sort of hitting at the same time and creating this explosive mixture that we're living in right now. And then you take all of that, which is very meta, very macro, and you take it down to the home level where there are just additional stresses, whether you're a family like us with 3 kids trying to school them at home, which is in and of itself insane, or you live by yourself, but the stress of living by yourself in a pandemic is so great. So I do think that this pressure cooker that we're in is going to come out the other side with sort of an explosion of amazing positive change. We're not seeing it yet, but you can see it kind of like you see flickers of the light, right, before it gets flipped on. And so I fundamentally believe that's going to happen. That is a much bigger sort of longer term thought. In the today, where I try to get my mindset every day is to focus on how awesome this day is for itself instead of thinking about what it could have been if it was a different world. And so it's a bit of gratitude. It's a bit of position shifting and mindset shifting. But I talked to my wife about it last night. I was like, so we went on a road trip because we couldn't go we were supposed to fly to South Carolina and meet my parents who live on the East Coast and all this stuff. We couldn't do that. So we did a road trip. We did like a 2.5, 3 week road trip through like all the southern states and up to like Mount Rushmore and Yellowstone. And it was great.
So
but we spent 24/7 together, me and my wife and my kids. We never left each other. And we've been home now. It was yesterday, so it was day 3 of being home and work. We're still in the same building. I'm upstairs, they're downstairs. But I walked downstairs to dinner yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, I miss you guys.
Oh.
And I was like, I genuinely was like sad. I saw them like 12 times that day, but it wasn't all day. And so I tried to think about that. And I'm like, wait, I'm getting to see you 12 times a day. In the previous world, I saw you like once a day in the morning, once a day before bedtime, and that was it. And so now I get these constant hits of family time, which is amazing. And if I'm missing being together 24/7 and I'm still in the building with you 24/7, imagine how hard it's going to be to go to like actual separation. Like, bye kids, you're going off to school for 8 hours. We'll see you at 5. That is going to be emotionally traumatizing. But that means that right now we're living on that. And that is a great thing that we're getting to do. Is it overwhelming sometimes? Sure. Is it super stressful sometimes? Sure, absolutely. But what an amazing blessing that the universe has given us that we get to have. Now, am I net happy that it's happening? No, because people are dying, people are starving, companies are failing, jobs are being lost. I'm not happy that it's happening. But from a survival perspective, and how do we create a world where in this pandemic, which we can't get rid of, if we could, we would. But if we can't, how do we live the best life we can? And that sort of shift of mindset, that's when I feel best about it. When I feel worst about it is when I'm like, I got to cut my own toenails for the 3rd time. I can't believe it. This sucks. I really miss getting a freaking pedicure. I really do. And a haircut. I mean, this mop is getting kind of ridiculous.
That's great. And do you see that people around you are, I mean, I think when you are running a business, you're training your Jedi warrior mindset of, I am creating something different in the world, right? You said it yourself. You're changing the whole floral industry as we speak. So you're practiced at creating something different in the world. And do you see other people around you also coming to the conclusion of, oh, this thing about creating a new world actually comes from me? Mm-hmm. Like, do you see us as a people, or the people around you that you see stepping into a greater empowerment of, oh shit, it's my turn. This is now I'm going to contribute, versus maybe before we were a little more, I don't know, behind the scenes or thinking that somebody else is going to do something. Do you see that?
Yeah. So I see pockets of it in some people. I see a realization, a reckoning, a dawning of realization that I can have more impact on this than I thought, or kind of maybe before I was a little bit asleep and now I'm waking up a little bit. But I also see just as equally, and probably a lot more so, a lot of frustration, a lot of feeling put upon by the world, a lot of feeling like a lot of just anger, right? And some of that I share. I value my family very much. They live on the East Coast. I don't get to see them in this time. That upsets me greatly. So I see it in fits and starts. Like I said earlier, I think it will get to a place where there's a tipping point. I think that it's forcing people into a way of life that is uncomfortable, and therefore they have to change the way they do some things. But there's, and I said this, I think yesterday in a conversation I had, like, humans do change slowly. Even if there's a shock to the system, which this is a massive shock, we tend to revert back to the mean, like whatever it was before. 80% of people, 80% of things, 80% of life will go back to the way it was before. That 20% is a massive change in a short period. If that 20% changes in a year and a half, normally it would take 2 decades. That's a big change. And that will lead to other change happening faster than it would have otherwise. But I do think that, like, if everything sort of continues as it goes, 80% of people will revert to exactly what it was before, will not change at all, be exactly what it was. But that 20% will be the sort of embers that create that fire that will create that bigger change much faster than it would have been otherwise. And I hope for it. I mean, again, no one's happy that we're in this, but we should all hope for the best potential change to come out of it.
I was saying before that it might get noisy because there's a little micro school behind me, and there's like 8 kids who are, it's just so inspiring to see. Like, they're sitting next to each other at the tables and making pizzas and tumbling rocks and super interactive, no masks, as it should be, like just kids being kids. And I wondered if you had any, aha moments around how this whole situation could inspire education. You having 3 kids and looking at how they learn and explore and adventure in the world. What's the potential for education and for our children?
Yeah, what this has showed me is that our system is fragile, and it does not, just like I said earlier about people, it does not change quickly. It's been very hard. We're a public school family. I went to public schools. My wife went to public schools. Our kids go to public schools. We believe in the public school system, but the public school system has struggled. It's not an entrepreneurial organization. By definition, it can't be. It's not meant to be. And so I do think that, look, everyone's being forced to be entrepreneurial in this time to get their kids and education, right? Whatever type it might be. I think the biggest sort of prime of the whole thing is that those with fewer resources will get less of one. That's always the case, but the impact is disproportionately on the poor, right? And often that's people of color. And that is I think the part that I think will inspire a new round of entrepreneurship within the space. We were looking at just in the spring, we were just looking for something online that they could do that is actually of educational value. Not just says it's educational games, but is actually educational and is fun. And it doesn't exist. No one's built anything, which is kind of shocking because kids love to play video games and parents really love it when their kids learn. Yet somehow we live in a world where that does not exist. The whole pod and sort of homeschooling thing is forcing a different way of looking at teacher hiring, communication, instruction, curriculum, space, all these things. Like I said to my wife, I was like, so if they do it all on Zoom and they're doing it all on Zoom in like 2 hours a day, what are they doing all the rest of the day at school? What's all the rest of the time for, if that's the instruction time, right? And so there's all these questions that come up and I have no answers. I don't know what they are, but again, similar to this sort of meta change that I've been talking about, I think the questions are being asked now in ways that they just weren't before because no one had to. Kids went off to school. They got hopefully decent grades. They graduated. They went to another school. They got whatever job they're going to get. They moved on. But how much better could it be? How much faster could it be? How much more efficient could it be? If you think about it, like one of the most inefficient things in the world is that you have a full-grown adult. Let's say their mental capacity maxes out at 68. I'm making it up. I don't know when all of a sudden my brain will start to be less efficient, but it will happen. Let's say it's 68. That entire life was spent learning things. And then their children, which they didn't have at 68 probably, are starting from scratch. Like, how inefficient is this? Why is this the way it works? We are learning things as a society all the time. Yet we're going back to the beginning, just where everyone else started. Now, I get it. A baby can't be like downloaded into their brain, whatever what the 68-year-old knows yet. But the mindset around education has stayed the same since 1960, whatever. And I hope and I think that what this is going to bring about is a bunch of experimentation, both by teachers and by public schools and private schools and educators and by parents and students, where everyone's going to learn a lot about what leads to the best learning, not through the sort of secondhand conversation of the parent to the teacher observing the student, but everyone actually living it every day because we're forced to. And again, what would I rather have all the kids back in school? Yes, I would. I think it's better for them than having us try to figure it out. But the lessons that we collectively learn, if those can be harvested in some way, should lead to positive changes for education and therefore for the kids.
Are there ways, you talked about us questioning ourselves, and are there ways that you are finding that you personally are questioning something inside of yourself these days?
Oh, it's a great question. I don't know. This is going to go back a little bit. It's not as active right now just because I've been so involved in like pandemic life. But I went to a therapist for a while, and sadly in pandemic world, I have not continued it. But it was this great conversation that I had with her. And the conversation is around what makes me tick, and this constant sort of drive to discover new things and try new things and try. It's like stimulus, interest, happy, stimulus, interest, happy, right? Repeat. And what was fascinating about the conversation was she was like, look, this is a great problem to have. You've turned it into something very productive, which is you started a company and you ran a company, and that's a good way to use it. But she was like, what would happen if you just turned it off? Like, what if you just like thought about not like trying to not be that way all the time? And I literally started to cry in this session with her because it was so scary to me to not have my brain constantly thinking on what, and she's like, look, it's not a bad thing, but maybe you just are missing chunks of life here and now, like today, because you're so focused on all the things that could be if you did X, Y, or Z. And it was a foundational question. And that was like March 8th, And then pandemic hit, and like self-reflection and working on that just went away, because it was about make sure the company is going to survive, make sure the family's going to survive, and then like try to thrive. And so we've been in that mode. But that is probably the biggest question. I don't even know if it's a good thing to do that, by the way. It's the reason why I got upset in that session was it's so foundationally who I am. It's like the kernel, it's the core. If you take that away, like then like what's left, right? But her point was well taken, which is if you're so stuck in what it could be, what might happen or whatever, you're missing what is just right in front of you right now. And that goes back, you mentioned earlier, like what's the worst part? I remember there were times where like when the twins were 1 or my son, maybe they were 2, where I would be playing with my daughter and having an interactive session with her where she was fully there. And I was 85% in like running some numbers or worrying about a person or a policy decision or a competitor or something, where I was in this brain space of churning on the business and completely missing what was happening right in front of me. And that obviously didn't feel great for me. She didn't know this. She was 1. Right? She was completely happy for her. But now when I look back on that journey and those times where all I felt was guilt, I realized that happened a lot. There was a lot of sort of not being fully present in whatever it was. And that includes the business, because then I was worrying about the kids. And so there's a whole set of work I need to do in that area that I don't understand yet. And I'm a little bit afraid to understand, because then it's kind of like, why does my brain need this constant churn? Like, what is it that I'm trying to stay away from or whatever? And there's no trauma or anything in my life that is obvious that would be the cause of that. It's just kind of how I was born and who I am. But I think it'll be fascinating to dig into it.
Oh my God, I just could imagine so much freedom if you were like, if you felt 500% present with your kids when you were with your kids, and 500% present with your business when you're with your business, and 500%, you would feel like nothing's lacking, everything's full and overflowing, right? I mean, I think that's exciting. And I think, your gift for ideas and creation is tremendous. And my guess, you'll find out, right? It's your life. But my guess is you can have it all. My guess is you can be wildly prolific and wildly present in every area simultaneously.
Right. And there's a journey to get to that. Because I can tell you, like at the beginning of this, when you did the little mini meditation, like that was, and by the way, your voice is like perfect for it. It's like so calming. That was the only time in the last, I don't know, 7 months that I wasn't on 3 tracks of thinking at the same time. Like I started exercising pretty dramatically about 1.5 years ago to like find a place to focus and blah, blah, blah. When I exercise now, my brain is not on the exercising at all. It's all on 17 other things. It's churning, it's running. I think I've gotten better with the kids. I'm much more present with my kids because now I focus on being better with it. But if I didn't actively turn it off, it would still be going. And so there's a lot of work to do in there that I think will be pretty amazing. But when we're no longer in homeschool triage mode.
Okay, I have something for you. I'm so excited. I can send you some flower essences, and you just put them in your water, in your tea, coffee, soda, kids, wife, share all around. And they help quiet your mind and create more space. So that rather than so the way I kind of experience it, because I have the same thing you do, the kind of churn, rather than the churn, it kind of slows that down and creates space. And then when there's like a one really big, awesome idea, it's like, boom, flash of insight, and you just know and you go for it. And then it's spacious.
Cool. I'll try it.
So I'll send you some flower essences. I don't know if you have you taken flower essences before?
No.
Oh my God. Okay. So because you're a flower guy. So every flower on the planet has a really specific, holistic healing quality for your mind. So some flowers make you sleep, some make you laugh, some make you heal old father issues. Like any human condition you could ever imagine, there's a flower for it.
Amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
I knew that I've heard of flower essences before. I certainly know that there are ingestibles and there's science behind the impact of the scent of flowers on mood and all those types of things, which is all great. But I did not know that it went as deep as sort of specific flowers, specific impact on the mind. So I'm down to try it.
Oh my God, it's the best. It's effortless. Like you don't even have to like process the past. You just take the flower essences and they just start to kind of like unravel the mucky muck.
Cool. I will try that for sure.
I'll send you some. Okay, so in wrapping up, are there any words of wisdom that you often find yourself sharing with others, or something that's just been on your mind, or something that springs to your heart in this moment that you would love to share with the listeners on any topic?
Yeah, I think one that has been pretty prevalent lately is that people just need to give themselves a break. Like we are so tough, especially Americans. We're so damn tough on ourselves. And most often for no reason. Like, look, if you're a real jerk to your spouse or something, yeah, like beat yourself up a little bit and get better. But, the amount of sort of self-blame and lack of ever feeling satisfied is consistent and I think just unhealthy for people. So I would say, like, look, always want to get better. Like it's not a bad thing to drive and to push to be a better version of yourself, but also give yourself a little credit for where you are and for what got you there, because you deserve some of that credit. And man, just like give yourself a break once in a while, right? If it means that you don't do a thing that you were supposed to do, which is an artificial thing that you decided you were supposed to do, by the way, let it slide for once, right? And find a better balance on that. Because I mean, I'm guilty of it too, but I think I just see a lot of it in today's world because it's so easy to focus in on where we're not doing great in a world where there isn't as much to distract us from what we're doing every day.
Love that. Thank you so much for your wisdom.
Absolutely. This was super fun. Let's do it again.
We can. Absolutely. And thank you for changing the flower industry.
We're working on it and we'll keep doing our best. If your listeners need anything, they can go to Bouqs.com, Bouqs.com. We have a pretty epic sale for folks that sign up for our subscription service, which is 30% off and free delivery, which is roughly 50% off all out the door. So talking about $36 fully delivered anywhere in the country.
What's a subscription?
So you can sign up for whatever frequency you want, once a week, once every other week, once a month, but you can skip any time. So there's no minimum. You could send once a year, twice a year, whatever it might be. And you can send them to yourself, to any loved one. You can change the address. So you can kind of use it however you'd like to use it. And it's super popular right now. People are loving it when they can't see their friends and family as much. It's a nice way to connect and have some good positive impact on them wherever they are.
I love that. All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to go visit Bouqs now and start my subscription.
I love it. Love it. And subscribe me to some essences.
Okay. Will do. Thanks, John.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.